So guys, welcome to our channel. We are Team Crushing the Meta, and today we're here with the champion.
The bro.
No.
The bro who played Bruce.
Whoa.
So tell us a little bit before we say who we are and who's chilling right here. So how does it feel
How does it feel?
to be the champion and finally get some hours of sleep?
no, definitely. Like when I woke up, I was very exciting because I was like, oh wait, I don't need to make breakfast because I already did. Okay, cool.
That's your first reaction.
Yeah,
I was
no.
supposed to be the champion. I didn't have to make breakfast because I already did.
Yeah, no, but
just thinking about food.
Yeah.
always.
Yeah.
Come on, but no, I didn't realize it myself. No, but like you wake up at like 2 a.m. in the morning, you play till 5 a.m. Then you go back to bed, but it's not like anyone is there, right? Like you're just on yourself, nobody is awake, and you're like, okay, bye bye, I will see you tomorrow, which is the same day. But when you wake up, your phone is ringing constantly, and then like, oh, you made the champion, blah blah blah, and it was like, oh yeah, that happened, but it was after, of course, you went to
It
bed.
felt like a dream until you got reality.
Yeah, sort of, because nobody was there. I was just there chilling by myself. After the interview with, of course, the casters, it was just over, and I was like, okay, cool, that's it. But if you're like on a road trip with your friends or something like that, then everyone is there with excitement. You're going to get them something to eat, of course, and then you have the entire environment with you. But now it's like,
we always celebrated that.
Yeah.
It didn't really matter what we did or if we achieved tops or went to work or not. We already just went to a restaurant after that and just chilled with the whole crew.
Yeah.
And they were nice days.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's coming back soon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, so today we have Sparkles, as of you already seen on screen. We have Chris chilling with us, as you saw from the last video, and of course our Dave. And he is going to show us his Bruce deck,
Yeah, definitely.
who he was able to take first place with in the bureau in the Asian.
Yeah, the Asia circuit.
Yeah.
And went in total, thinking, like 10-1 in total, like in total rounds.
Yeah.
But of course, I went undefeated also in the top cut.
Yeah.
So I only lost like in the Swiss rounds, of course. Otherwise, I wouldn't be like first place.
Yeah.
I played in the rounds. I played against the person that, I lost against the person that I played finals with. Managed to succeed in the finals. So yeah, got first place and got my revenge match, of course.
Ah.
So the deck did for me quite wonderful because I went for a quite aggressive playstyle, of course, what we discussed about, playing the mirrors non-stop. And yeah, just showcasing you guys my list. It's like very standard, I think. But still some things that people don't really understand yet why I play certain things, so that's why I will explain it just here.
Alright.
So let's go over the right line, of course. And nothing out of the ordinary because we're playing Bruce. You don't have really much of an option. So of course playing the D-starter, it doesn't really matter. Then of course on top we write Matt, of course, just gets you the starter out. Then we put it back in with Richard, which gives us an extra draw. And then of course, Bruce, the final boss unit. It's what the deck revolves around. You cannot really play this without the boost, and yeah, you will just see in the deck, of course.
Yeah. Right, so let's give you a little bit more room so you could show us the deck.
So of course, for something that's self-explanatory, I'm playing 3 copies of the Personalite. You cannot really play the deck without. It's just free power onto your final rush turn, where you just essentially give 50k to the front row, if you count it like every 10k. And if I had the option to play this more, I would personally, because it's just a great option. But unfortunately we can't because it's restricted to having like 4 units in a main deck, and we of course already play this in our white deck, of course. But yeah, so that's self-explanatory. Then something I call the one-man army, but this time it's woman. No, but this is just, we of course know this. This is the biggest beat in the deck.
Marjorie actually does everything that the deck
Yeah.
wanted. It draws, it soul charges,
Yeah,
and
definitely.
it becomes a beater.
Yeah, and it's quite like in the early game, it's not that impactful, but we still play it at 4 because when you're going for the grind matchups or you're going into your second final verse turn, then you definitely need the soul for you to be able to keep up that pressure. Also makes a very good 33k number on herself, which is very magic in this deck, or any deck rather than D, of course. With just having one persona right or just one innovation of 10k, so yeah, self-explanatory, and just empty your field.
And she makes also Leonard better.
Yeah, definitely. Then what I said about the persona right is true that we want to play more of course, but we cannot really play it at more copies, but we can still try. So we play 3 copies of Helpless Full Life. Really wanted to play this at 4 for the same reason that I explained earlier about boost. If we could play more, then I definitely want to play more. The only difference in this is it's an order card, it's not a unit card. So what I had earlier in Switch rounds is what happened. My hand was very not ideal. I had like a persona right on hand and then a second boost and nothing really anything as a beater. So what I just did is I just put out the boost and just smack with it, of course with 23k with persona right and everything like that. But the order is an order that's not a unit on the field, so you cannot really rush with it, you cannot really like play an early game with it. And even though if you need it in the later stages where you just need a unit of Derrick or something like that, this just doesn't really do the job. But still really a nice powerhouse in combination with Final Wish, because it gives another 50k to the front row, which is just insane in total. But as I said, I wanted to play more copies if I could, but that's due to the fact that I'm playing also 2 copies of the defensive order. And this is, I just decided to go on 5 orders in total. We decided on that a little bit, because Chris
6 just didn't play well, especially with Derrick. Sometimes you're using Derrick and you will get 2 units out of it, and you're thinking like, if one of them is a beater, that's good, but the other one doesn't matter because it will be something that you put in soul with Marjorie.
Yeah.
And then when you get the order, you have to commit something else from hand for the Marjorie, and sometimes it's just that shield value that you don't want to give up.
Definitely. So I decided, and of course you too, I decided not to go for the 6 orders, and I think that's for us correct, because we want to rush in the early game, so we don't want to play too much of orders. But I personally really wanted this defensive order against the vulnerable matchup specifically, and that's why I decided on being on the 3-2 split, where you guys of course went.
We
for
went
the,
on 4-1.
Yeah.
You went also on 4-1.
Yes.
Yeah.
Defensive for Helllife.
Yeah, there's nothing like a wrong choice in this. I think it's just my personal preference, and
It worked for you, so.
Yeah, it worked for me. Yeah, definitely. In the vulnerable matchup, this really came up for me, so I was really happy I'm playing more copies of these. So that's it for the order.
They're also very good in the Zorga matchup.
Yeah.
Because of the shark.
Yeah, and also against the DI type of deck. Barrow Magnus, where you have the Belladoria effect on the entire turn.
That's the same with the shark.
Yeah, definitely. Because this isn't coming from hand, it just comes from the order zone, which gives you a Vanguard plus 20k, so you work around that card restriction, of course.
This is not even placing card on the guard circle.
Yeah,
so.
correct. Then self-explanatory, also self-explanatory. Playing 4 copies of Derrick. He punishes your opponent for having an empty field. Can give you lots of soul, can give you the correct amount of units from the top of the deck. If you're playing very aggressive in the early game, this can be handy, where you just put everything down from your hand. Your hand is a little bit small, your opponent is attacking or removing your rear guards, and he can just give you an entire new field from the top of the deck, of course. So yeah, just work wonders. And then of course with his backup combat, the sort of...
Damn, Leonard became the backup to Ugly Boy.
Yeah, Derrick did far more for me than Leonard, of course. No.
The drag queen.
The drag queen, yeah, definitely. Now, this combo just works amazing because Leonard punishes your opponent for having a full field, while Derrick punishes your opponent for having an empty field. So depending on how your opponent is playing, you can just punish your opponent for it. Also for the fact Leonard can play a little bit more of an early game because he is on hit pressure to call something from the soul when your own boost is not final rush restricted. So what you can do of course is like having your boost as your Vanguard, then having Leonard on the side. Let's say for example your opponent has a unit onto the field, you can just pressure it with the Leonard for 10 to 10. They usually don't want to guard it, but of course his on hit skill goes off anywhere. So even if it hits the rear guard, even if it hits the Vanguard, so you can counter rush your opponent a little bit and still get that free value. And this combo just punish your opponent for everything.
Some people forget that Leonard's skill to soul charge and call something goes off without final rush.
Yeah.
So just for the video's sake, the final rush ability is the 5k and the attacking the whole column. But the soul charge and the calling is not final rush.
Yeah, and it's mandatory, which is also quite important. Because in the later stage, what I usually did is, when I already had a Leonard on the field, people would just attack it because they're scared of it.
Just let it go.
And I'm thinking just let it go. It's weaker in the later stage of the game. They're usually already on high damage. Hi guys.
It becomes a double-edged sword because in one of my games, I let the Leonard hit the whole column because he had 4 cards on deck and he had to soul charge 2. And he didn't know that the soul charge was mandatory. So I was like, sure, soul charge 2. Then he could not attack anymore with his Vanguard. So that's something that people forget is they think that you may soul charge, but it's just on hit soul charge.
Yeah, definitely.
Attacking a column could actually be very devastating.
Yeah, and with how my Swiss rounds in top 8 went, we went into a lot of like tiny deck scenarios where you only had like 2 cards on deck, 4 cards on deck. Because if you're playing in the later stage of the Swiss rounds in the top cut, your opponent is also very careful about taking damage and guarding attacks of course. And then you're just sort of hoping that you don't have the Leonard in your end stage scenario. There you just want to have Derrick of course.
Yeah, or actually none of the two because both of them just soul charge.
Yeah.
If you have another beater then that's also good.
Yeah, but at least Derrick is a 15k without any drawbacks because you can just...
That makes Eden better. Eden actually, especially with front triggers, I think also maybe with set 4 we will see Eden make a comeback because it's just a solid card and does it soul charge.
Yeah, definitely. But of course playing 8 copies of grade 2s, I wanted to play more. But of course we also need, I personally need the orders and everything like that. And also needed to have some grade 1 space, of course for certain matches.
When you go second, also it's good to have that grade 1 out there.
Because you just want to have some grade 2s in your hand for you to rush early. But if you're going second, then you have the first attack on your grade 1s. And then you want to have more grade 1s in your hand of course for you to rush. Now then, something that's like every deck wants, 4 RPGs. Do we have to say something about this? It's just like the only thing I would say is like just
mulligan maybe, like against some decks in some certain matchups you keep it in hand, but some others you'd rather just put it back.
Definitely.
Mulligan in Overtrigger is something very important. We'll not talk about it in this video. I think we'll make a whole separate video talk about it. Because the way you mulligan against different sort of decks actually makes a huge difference.
Against the 3 attack decks, this is really important. So something like a Zorga, Saga, Perfidia. This comes up.
Do you want to talk about it? No. Zorga, PGs,
Nightmares.
Damage. Death.
Yeah, but for the rest, I just mulligan it away because it's not an aqua piece. That's really it. So.
Also good to call with cards like Leonard out of your soul or with Derrick, and then you could always just Marjorie it back into your soul, build it back to your hand. Yeah. You could do some crazy
so
things.
So if you need to soul blast 5, then it's still safe for you to suck it.
Exactly, yeah.
Then I'm playing 4 copies of Portable. This is the perfect mate for Leonard, because this column with Leonard is very devastating if you also have a Marjorie on your side. Especially if your opponent is on 3 or 4 damage, because what you can just do is attack with, of course, your Marjorie into the Vanguard. If they let it hit, then or 4, maybe 5 damage, and then you can just put Leonard with the Portable to the side column, try to hit something and call the Marjorie out once again. Because this can of course suck and the Marjorie to add something to hand. Let's say for example a defensive card, 15k shield, maybe another beater for the next turn. and with that you have just your 6 attacks instead of your normal 5 attacks.
Yeah, and also you have the Mercury, which will eat one of
Yeah.
these unit in the column.
And that counterplays against the
Leonard.
opponent Leonard.
Yeah, that's something that I found very, very interesting. Is your setup would actually be Leonard build Marjorie, basically. And sometimes you put up behind the Marjorie, you put Dogo. So you'll be attack with Marjorie, Dogo boosting, and then Dogo will go to Leonard.
Yeah.
And basically with the last Marjorie attack, you will eat up again one of these, so they don't have the column.
Yeah, and for Dogo we're talking about Dober. We just, say it about Dober, or Dogo.
Dogo, Doper,
Yeah.
Wolf, I mean, he has been called many names.
Yeah, definitely. We like it because it's essentially 28k on the board. Gives, of course, the first 8k boost, which usually boosts something like a Marjorie, for example. Then gives 10k to Leonard, and Leonard will restand for another 10k. I personally like this ratio because I wanted to play 6 great ones in my final cut. Of course, you can count, of course, your PGs in, but your PG is not an aggro piece. You don't want to rush with it because it's only 6k base. This is 8k base, so if you're going second, it can hit the opponent's Vanguard for solo. Right. Doesn't really need a boost. But what I was finding in testing this, what I first did is like play 3 copies of each. So I played 3 copies of the Dober and 3 copies of the Portable. But when you're playing the early game, you rely too much on one piece instead of the other. So let's say, for example, I rush for my Portable and I wanted to have it later for my Leonard plane. What I do is put on the field, attack with it, and my opponent gets rid of it. Then this is out of the deck, and then I have still like 2 left in the deck to play with. In that scenario, getting like a second Portable to your hand is really hard. Yeah. You just need quite a good luck for you to find it. And then, for example, you get your Dober into your hand, and you're like, I wish this was a Portable. Yeah. So that's why I played a 4-2 ratio of this. Just because I wanted to emphasize more on one card than another instead of doing the 3-3 split. So, but that I want to play 6 great ones is, self-talking in my opinion.
Yeah, well the thing is that this is actually his 4th order. This was his 4th order, but with the play testing he thought, well, the deck is actually less flexible because it doesn't rush when you wanted it to rush. So that's why adding the last copy to make it 6 great ones, and also this is just a very good card. If you commit with this in the early game and you lose it, then you could think, okay, I will not have Doper in this game, but it's still playable. But when you lose
Bodobulb, it's far more harsh because let's say, for example, you're going second, you quite need a good defense for yourself to also survive their second final rush turn, if they survive your final rush turn, of course. And that's where Podobulb really kicks in, because he can just add your PGs, your 15k shields, your 20k shields, your orders, your Overtrigger, Personalite, and he can just make it so you have a winning strategy for your upcoming turn. Yeah. And that's usually the turn that the game will over, mostly on your second final.
If you have another strong turn with build giving you a Persona Ride, because mostly just adding the Persona Ride is just really good. Then that's mostly very effective.
And in that scenario, he's also like a second order, of course. Yeah. So just playing the 4-2 ratio, and that's it really. Then for my trigger lineup, I'm playing 4 copies of the crit. You want to, if you get, for example, a crit in the early game, it's really nice, because then you have to rush your opponent a little bit less. You still want to rush, of course. Because if your opponent is setting at 4 damage when you're going into your final rush turn, it's really devastating for them, because you have on-hit effects, you have very big columns that hits the 43k mark and everything like that. And hitting just the right crits at the right moments can be devastating, but still, they're not 20k shields, and their skill to put themselves into the zone isn't that big, in my opinion, because like in my Swiss ones, I encountered that I didn't really need the soul. It's just for counter playing certain matchups. So let's say, for example, I should play, or if I played against something like a Seraph Snow, I can just put it into the prison, call it out, put it into the soul, and deny their 3 imprisoned units. Also, when I play against a mirror boost, of course, and I get this off the Derrick, I can just boost something like a Leonard It's the 19k mark if he's in final rush. Doesn't really make a magic number, but it is above the threshold of 18.
Just 5k more.
Yeah,
guard,
5k
which is
more,
good.
and puts himself into the soul. So like the opponent's Leonard cannot really attack with it.
Yeah.
So that's just really what this cards come down to.
Actually, 19 is a magical number because we don't have the 10k shields.
Yeah.
So they basically have to give up 2 5ks, which is good.
Yeah.
Or they have to give a 15k shield.
Yeah, and mostly, and it's a Leonard, so they usually want to guard it because of the hit push. So it makes like that extra 5k you let them drop is just very magical because it's usually instantly a 15k. Then I play 4 copies of the Vanguard. And this is just because of the 20k shield. Like, I didn't really play this for the front effect. If I could choose a trigger type that has the same effect, I would of course choose the critical trigger. But it's just, I want to have more shield value in my deck because in Overtrigger we don't really have that much shield. And the 5k extra makes a big difference against decks such as Loronowal and of course other decks that make that 28k mark perfectly. Then it's just a 1 card drop instead of a 2 card drop from your hand. So that's really it for the front triggers, and of course we're trying to play aggro in the early game, so we usually go for a wide board instead of a strong board early game. And so the front trigger can also be quite nice for you to rush your opponent with. So that's really it. Bye-bye. And then I played the 3 draw triggers. We were quite split on this, I think, because Chris was playing the 2, you were none, and I was playing on 3. And what I just played this for is like extra fodder for Marjorie, for example. If I get rushed into the early game and I see this as my defensive, I have more options to guard and make better decision based on what I can play aggro with, because the extra draw in the early game is just very nice because you can discard this for the right deck. You can, of course, if you get an extra piece to your hand, you can just conserve it and play another piece from your hand for the early aggressiveness. And I just like this overall to make the deck more consistent. And especially if you're going very aggro into the early game, you sometimes have the scenarios where you don't have any pieces or not enough pieces on your hand to make that final push into your final rush turn. So the draw triggers helped for me at least. So yeah, of course you played Harv, you played the critical triggers more to pressure your opponent early on. Yeah, it's just personal preference, I think, and I just decided on this.
Well, the thing is, with the draw triggers, for me, I think it was different. I don't know what about you, Chris.
I mean, the draws are still nice. I think, like you said, because you want to rush, you do want your pieces in your hand in order to rush. So I think the draws are nice, but at the same time, I felt like because you are a rush deck and you need Soul to use Bruce's skill to Soul Blast 5, you go through your deck really quickly. So I noticed that when I was playing 3 or more, I would be in the danger of when you drive check that you would would use like draw and deck out. So that's the reason I only play 2, because I was thinking like I do like the draw effect, but not too much. So for me 2 was the perfect option.
Yeah, that's also very true, because you just rush through your deck insanely fast. Because with Derrick you usually sold just 3 to 4 cards if you're playing against your mirror or something like a Loronowal. If also with Marjorie you sold just quite a lot, you draw quite a lot in this deck, and then the draws on top of it, you go to deck out either way. But in testing, the extra draw that I played instead of Chris didn't really come up for me, and just having the 3 draws makes just a perfect ratio in your trigger lineup.
For me, the philosophy is a little bit different. I think it will change with the new draw though. So what I had in mind is getting a draw trigger and drawing an extra card, right? A big chance that what you draw also has a 5k shield. So basically you have a 10k shield even with having an extra card on hand. While getting a crit or a front, you're already getting a 15k shield or even a 20k shield. So what I did is I actually played 8 crits, and instead of the 3 draws, I played 3 fronts for the 20k shield value. The only way I found the draws better than a crit and a front is in the early game where you don't want to commit. You attack with only your Vanguard and they 15k for no pass or Overtrigger to pass. that's the only point when if getting a front is not effective, getting a crit is not effective, but getting a draw is effective.
Yeah.
So that's the only point where I found the draw is interesting, but having them on hand, discarding them to ride, basically the same thing with a crit or front.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, it's just personal preference, I think. Like
Play style, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Because I played quite aggressive for my pieces. I just throw them down and I hope to draw into other pieces for my final rush turn. So this helps me draw into them more frequently, and that's really it.
Yeah, which is understandable, because if you play the deck more aggressively, then you need something to get the cards back to your hand to go into those final rush turns. So then the draw could be more effective than a crit.
And then the most important card of this deck, which was like the most discussed card among us, of course, the heal triggers. Come on, you need to play this instead of the spike ball heal.
That's the moment the camera will go and go back.
No. This
differences between a gear player and a spike player, I guess.
I think so
No.
I played 3 of the spike and 1 of that one because I had the foil. So
Okay. Reasons.
exactly.
Why though?
Yeah. Also for me, the reason why I didn't play draws because there were no SP draws, and I wanted the whole thing to be SP. I was like, I want to play the new crit, but also the front, and I was looking at the draw and being DI boy, you're out.
No, but this makes the biggest difference of life, of course. No, definitely not. It's just for heals, but like, come on.
I think this made a big difference because most other Bruce players played the Bruce heal, and the heal is just better.
Yeah, definitely.
So how many miracle heals did you get?
0.
No. Yeah, like I lost only one match, and of course in AO, and it was not.
And she couldn't help with that.
No.
But if you know, this is actually a very interesting fact, is that Dave also works in a lab, right? I mean, it's your study, so this is actually quite interesting because that's what she's looking like doing, right? So, and of course, you know Dave, and he's basically our gear expert, so of course he plays as much gear cards as he could play.
Definitely. Like Dogo is in foil, Portal Bob is finally in foil. So of course I have to play these cards at foil, of course.
Important reasons.
Yeah, definitely.
And now we actually come into one of the things that, for me, actually was very strange that people had so many questions about. And I don't know about you, but the most people asked Dave about his deck list. Why did you play the Crane Mantle Overtrigger, right? So, what's the difference, or what's the reason why you found the Crane Mantle one more important to add to the deck than the Dark State one?
Yeah, what I personally find with this Overtrigger, like, is you have more, how do I say this? You punish your opponent a little bit more when you're going against an opponent that's already on 4 damage. Because in later stages you're usually already PGing your Vanguard because they don't want to have that extra crit on top of it, because you still have the chance to get that crit even if you play it at 4. And they usually don't want to take that chance to get them critted to 6. And then when you get your Overtrigger on that point and they're on 4, you of course can make like very good plays if you have a Leonard and a Marjorie set up. Because then you can really force out that on-hit pressure from Leonard, and they need a second PG against that. Let's say, for example, you play the Dark Stage Overtrigger, of course, they can PG one column, but the other column doesn't have any big power-ups or something like that, because the 10k and the crit instantly goes to the Vanguard. It's of course better in the early game, the Dark Stage Overtrigger, but it's just such a small chance that you see it. I don't see really the big difference, and this, for me, comes up more when you go from turn 3 onwards, because let's say for example I make a little bit of a field. So let's say for example I have my Marjorie chilling right there, I have my, that's not Bruce. This is Bruce.
I have Matt as my Vanguard.
No.
I have my Pulpy boy.
And let's say for example Leonard. So let's say for example this is your rush turn, in the sense that you're on your first grade 3 turn but still not on final rush. So you attack with your Vanguard first, because you of course have also the chance to get your front triggers, and then you want to attack with your Vanguard first, and your opponent is usually going for a 2 to pass, and that's quite comes up quite often because this is just 13 on itself. You usually don't boost or anything with
Just
it.
a 15k for them to pass.
And if you get your Dark Stage Overtrigger at that point, then you just give everything to the Vanguard, they 2 damage, and if they, for example, get like 1 defensive trigger, this doesn't do nothing this doesn't do anything because they don't hit. You can of course attack your opponent's rear guards a little bit with it, but it doesn't punish your opponent for anything. But let's say, for example, you get the Grey Elemental Overtrigger, you can give 100 million to your Vanguard, also to the rear guard, so they take 1 damage. If they get a defensive trigger, for example, of course Marjorie can't hit, but you can still pressure with Leonard. If they don't PG or anything like that and they just let it hit because it's 100 million, you can just call out a booster behind Marjorie, which still hits your opponent against a defensive trigger. So it helps a little bit more in the early, like after Grade 3 turn, I think, because it punishes your opponent in some scenarios far more than it does with the Dark Stage Overtrigger.
But basically, also when you go into that final rush turn, right?
Yeah.
So you'll be like attack, restand, and if you play the Dark State Overtrigger, then they need to PG.
Yeah.
PG.
Yeah.
But if you play this one, they need to PG.
Yeah.
Which 3 PGs on hand is something very difficult to have too. You do have that more often.
Yeah.
But for me, well, the thing is, I expected more people to play the Crane Elemental one because the Crane Elemental one was the logical choice. I also still think that the Crane Elemental one is the better choice.
Yeah.
But I just played the the Overtrigger from Dark State because it's beautiful SP and because I like it more. But I still thought that this was the more logical choice. But for some reason, people actually played more the Dark State one, and that's something that I thought is strange.
Yeah, I also didn't expect that. I also played the Dark States because I like the Dark States a little bit more to my own playstyle. But I did expect more Grey Elemental ones.
Yeah.
But the funny thing about the Dark State one is because sometimes people may make your Vanguard a 1 to pass, and you get the Overtrigger, you still can say, okay, 10k and the critical goes to my Vanguard.
Power to
and
land.
I give something else, the 100k million to something else. Sometimes people forget that.
Yeah, and what you can also of course do is, let's say for example you want to counterplay your opponent's Overtrigger. So let's say for example they're also on 5, they PG'd your Vanguard, but they, like, Marjorie is already hitting for like something like 43, 53 usually at that point. And if it's already on PG territory almost. And let's say for example your opponent doesn't have a PG, so they let Marjorie hit, then they get an Overtrigger. You can give like the both instances of 100 million to Leonard. So you can counterplay them getting that Overtrigger at that 6 point, because this hits still 100 million over their Overtrigger, and at that point, yeah, you can still kill them without even, let's say for example, you can still kill them while they get an Overtrigger, and that's why I think...
They still need a perfect guard, because you're actually giving him 200 million.
Yeah, exactly. And let's say for example you have your Dark Stage Overtrigger, yes of course you can give your Vanguard 10k and a crit, but if they PG it, it's just wasted. And that's why I think like the Grey Elemental worked more for me, like in my personal testing. But when I went into the rounds and the Swiss rounds, of course, in the top 8, yeah, the difference wasn't really there, because in one of the earlier Swiss rounds I got the Overtrigger in the early game, like on grade 1 or 2, and then the Dark Stage Overtrigger will make a bigger difference. But later in the Swiss, my opponent was chilling on 5, I attacked with my Vanguard of course, and this was sort of the board setup, and then I got this, and that killed him instantly, and I was like, okay, so this make a bigger difference. So there were 2 scenarios where the one would be better, and the other one would also be better, but it didn't really, like, in the end it didn't really matter for me. But still I decided...
I think for me, the Crane Elemental one is better in the late game. It's more explosive. It just gives you that actually 300 million because they need PG. And the Dark State one is better if you get it early. Because if you drive check this as a first attack, well, that does nothing. Even if they put the 15k shield, you go over the 15k shield, still 1 damage.
Yeah.
So that's not that big of a difference. But again, even in my testing, I found the Crane Elemental better. But I just played the Dark State one because I like that one more. So again, I think it's very interesting that people still asked about this, but again, it's also good to have that explanation. Also, one thing I think most people didn't really think about is you could give one of your units 200 million to counterplay in Overtrigger.
Yeah, and what you can also do, and this is, you really need to read your opponent's scenario very good, because what you, let's say for example, this is your board setup. So your Marjorie already sucked something in and made it so she already is very big. You can also give the 100 million to your Leonard and to your portable. Let's say for example they
Hit
are
the column with Leonard.
Yeah, and they're already on 4 damage. They have enough to guard against the Marjorie, because this is guardable with just normal shield. This is of course not guardable by normal shield. They need a PG for this, but if they don't have a PG, you can just attack with the Leonard of course, put this into the soul, add something to hand, and then this, they will just let this hit. Then you can still call out something from your soul, and this will also still hit for above 100 million. And with that, you actually got more shield out of your opponent's hand by having this one extra attack with Marjorie.
This is actually the reason why I also thought the Elemental one is better,
Yeah.
but I do it a little bit different. The way I play, so this is basically your field, and mostly you have something else here.
Yeah.
So this will be your first attack, sucking whatever you have in here. And the second attack is actually very interesting, is you attack into a column. And this happens against Cat Lady, because Cat Lady has a booster behind the Vanguard.
Yeah, that counter charges.
Exactly. So this attacks a column, and then when you attack with this, they'll both will restand. And when you get the 100 million, you give it to those two.
Yeah.
And this will actually, after attacking with that, putting into the soul with him, this will attack into the Vanguard. But this will now hit their back row Vanguard as well. Because on the first attack, you attack the column with him.
Yeah.
So what happens right here is now they need a double PG. Because he will hit...
when they guard the first
Yeah.
attack for the Vanguard as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, if they, when you attack first into a column, they guard or no guard, that's not a problem. But now you attack into the Vanguard, and now you will hit their back row Vanguard as well. So this will be actually the double 100 million, and now they will guard their Vanguard, but they will have to let the booster die, or they have to drop double PG. And that's when the card that you call right here becomes very effective, because this still hit for the 100 million.
Yeah.
And they forget that Leonard will attack the
Vanguard
booster
back
behind
row.
the Vanguard. And this actually is quite useful against the runner roll,
Yeah.
because that deck always calls the booster behind the Vanguard. They need the counter charger.
Because with the counter charger they can call or add more cards to the hand with of course the grade 2, have more flexibility, and also like there are just some matchup that needs that extra boost on the Vanguard. And that's where this strategy comes really into play. But of course this is like one of the scenarios, it
Needs to happen.
It needs to happen of course, and it's just one of those extra things why I played the Grey Elemental Overtrigger of course, but in the end it didn't really make a difference for me. But of course it can make a difference, and that's why I just thought I will play the Grey Elemental Overtrigger.
Right. Are there any other things you wanna tell the people watching this video about maybe the tournament, or just how it felt, or anything else you want to add apart from the deck and deck list?
Yeah, from the deck, like how I felt during the tournament is like it was very a rush scenario. So everyone was rushing of course in the AO side, and I think with my deck, and that of course our deck, really did great in that, because we also built a little more of a rush variant to counterplay also, or play with that strategy in mind. But for the rest, yeah, for the matchups I expected more vulnerable players to play against. That's why I also played more on the defensive orders of course, to counteract it a little bit. But in the end I only encountered one vulnerable matchup, and I was quite surprised with that. And of course you saw it in the top 8 of her presentation that there was only one vulnerable player overall and 6 boosters. So you could say I shouldn't have really done that, but in the end you couldn't really know, and it's just an expectation you have of course. Yeah. But for the rest, yeah, nothing really else, I think.
Alright, nice. Well guys, thank you for watching, thank you for tuning in on the channel, and don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment, and of course, well done Dave. We're proud of you.
Let's go.
So thank you guys, and till next time.
Goodbye.
Bye.